Hello, welcome back to the channel. It's me, Emmy the Cat Lady, and we are back on our Science of Folate series talking about FEV and the Super Mutants. So today we're talking about the Institute strains of FEV and what they've been doing. So we're here in the Commonwealth inside the FEV lab and the biosciences part of the Institute. So there's a lot of scientific research, experiments and things going on in this massive facility, all of it super secretive. Unsurprisingly, FEV was one of these experiments, at least until very recently. So the research began in 2178 when Dr. Elliott recorded a report on the bioscience division, their progress and success. He also started expressing some concerns about the tests with FEV. Because another scientist, Dr. Frederick, had already had samples and got pre-approval from the directorate to start this project. So you can find a couple of holotapes here in this room. So this is where we found the terminal and the holotape from Brian. But there's also kind of easy to miss actually if you're not paying attention and you don't have your torch on. So there's two holotapes here. One there and one here that have some interesting things, but of course we need to find them. See if this is the right one.
This is Dr. Elliott with the official report for the Directorate from Bioscience. The date is, August 2178. I'm pleased to report that, as has been the case during my tenure, crop yields exceed expectations. In point of fact, everything down here is fine, with one notable exception. Dr. Frederick has informed me that the Directorate has pre-approved research on samples of the FEV virus, which he already has in his possession. Now, I'm not one to question the Directorate, you all know that. I don't even want to know where this came from, but, well, this is troubling. Dangerous, possibly. I will do my best to make sure risks are minimized, but I really do hope that the consequences are understood.
There we go. So, yep, he's concerned about the risks of messing with FEV, the consequences, possibly because their early results, such as what happened to Edgar Swan, who we talked about a couple of weeks ago, which they must have known about because Brian Virgil does, if you've read the notes at Swan's Pond, you can actually ask Brian Virgil about Edgar Swan, and he remembers the records as one of the earliest test subjects for the FEV. And then the next one is 46 years later, so this is quite a big jump in time for this, related to this research. Hang on. Yeah, so quite a big jump in time. 46 years later, in 2224, we've got another report here from Dr. Elliott, so let's have a listen.
This is Dr. Elliott reporting for the Bioscience Division, March 2224. We just received another batch of subjects, but as my previous report stated, we're at an impasse here. More of the same won't help. The two most promising strains of FEV have been adapted to an ideal state, but we're still missing something. I am officially echoing the team's position. The most likely progress for our research on synthetic organics requires new avenues of exploration. Additional Commonwealth subjects will not help. It's the same problem across the board. Exposure to too much radiation. We need someone new. There's a proposal we'll be putting forward. I am not entirely comfortable with it, but it seems the best course.
Here we go. So, 2224, and there's no new results, no progress. The very definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. So they've been bringing subjects in from the Commonwealth and exposing them to FEV, creating super mutants, but the problem that Dr. Elliott's highlighting is that the people from the surface have been exposed to too much radiation, so they're not reacting well to the FEV. And at this point, as we mentioned previously, the main reason that the Institute wanted to test with FEV at this point is because they wanted to create their synthetic organics, the synths, the Gen 3 synths. So they were using FEV to try and find ways to basically create synthetic organisms. But nothing was working because of the radiation. So they need someone who's not been exposed to any radiation. So Dr. Elliot mentioned an uncomfortable proposal that could turn things around and get the results that they want. Wonder what that could be. So what if I told you that the year that Shaun was taken from Vault 111, so that bit in the prologue where you wake up and Kellogg shoots your spouse and takes your baby, that happened in 2227. So it's 3 years after this was recorded. So this is actually the background context for what happened to our player character and that inciting incident that sets us on this path that we leave the vault and go looking for our missing child. This guy is basically responsible for that by saying, yeah, we need someone who has no radiation exposure. And you might be wondering, why would they take a baby instead of all the other, perfectly viable human beings that were frozen in Vault 111? And the thing about it is that a baby that young can't argue, complain, or refuse to do things, and the baby can also be raised to believe in the Institute's philosophy, and that the Institute, what they want to do is what's most important. They can basically mould that child into exactly what they want. And then obviously we know Shaun ends up going on to become the director of the Institute. So safe to say that worked pretty well in their favour. So that's why they don't take one of the adults. But obviously you're the backup, as Kellogg says to you, that you're the backup. So if something was to go wrong with the baby, then they could come back and, I guess, source more DNA from you or something like that. But, we're talking about 2227 this year, and the game is 2287, so that was 60 years ago. And they continued with this programme for another 60 years, even though they'd perfected their synths, the synthetic organics, and as Brian Virgil says, they did nothing new with the FEV. They just kept making super mutants and sending them out into the wild where they just cause havoc. So the Institute's been kidnapping people, not just replacing them with synths, but also to make more super mutants, because why not, I guess. There's no other reason for them to be doing this, but they do it anyway, at least until Brian Virgil has a crisis of conscience and sabotages the project, because you can see, obviously we've got two of these tubes with mutants, and then this one's broken and there's a chair in it, so he's obviously that might be even how he exposed himself to FEV and just left it all over the floor. But, so he comes in and sabotages it and puts a stop to it. And the Commonwealth super mutants here, they're again very distinct from the ones that we've met before. So separate subspecies, as are the Vault 87 mutants and the Mariposa mutants. So they're all completely separate subspecies, but with the same kind of basic background that, they were humans exposed to FEV that became mutants. So there's some things that they have in common and there's some differences between them. So like the others, they're big, strong and green, but their intelligence doesn't seem to have been damaged quite as much as the Vault 87 mutants. They do have a kind of hierarchy, they have a chain of command, they can come up with tactics, build up defences, set traps and things, and manage their territory. And their speech patterns are much better in terms of more clearer, proper English, which I sometimes struggle with as well. And more like, they speak more like people than the mutants of the Capital Wasteland tend to. And they do also seem to have that continual growth curve that we saw with the Vault 87 mutants, which is why you do encounter super mutant behemoths in Fallout 4 in the Commonwealth. Edgar Swan being a kind of unique example. And I say we did talk about his story before. I'll link that video here if you want to check it out, if you've not seen it already. But there's more they've got more in common, I would say, with the Vault 87 mutants, but their intelligence is a bit better and their speech is a bit better. So they do have a bit more of an understanding of things, and not just about smashing and grabbing and things, but they obviously are still very aggressive, kidnapping people, killing people, all that kind of stuff. And they do also believe themselves to be the superior race, which again is something that we did see with the Super Mutants in Vault 87 to a degree, and certainly with the Master's Army, the Mariposa Mutants, who definitely saw themselves as the superior race, the next step in human evolution, and better than, humans or ghouls. So interestingly, if you have Strong as a companion and you give Brian Virgil the serum that you find here, he just doesn't like it. He's upset about it because why would anyone not want to be a super mutant? Strong's entire life goal is to find the milk of human kindness so that he can make super mutants better than humans and stronger than humans, because that's what he believes should be the thing. So quite an interesting one. And this all happened with the lab being sabotaged and destroyed. That all happened prior to us exiting the vault, of Vault 111. And we don't really know what the effects are of this strain of FEV that was used here on the reproductive systems, but safe to assume that, like the other super mutants in the other places, these mutants are probably also sterile and unable to reproduce. And now that the Institute's not making them anymore, more so if you then blow up the Institute at the end of the game, they are doomed to die out eventually, same as the other populations of super mutants that we find. It might take a long time, but it's going to happen eventually, probably before the heat death of the universe, And just like other games, you can encounter some friendly super mutants like Strong, who is obviously a companion, and is a big fan of Shakespeare because it's given him insight into how to make super mutants stronger than humans, so good for him. And then one of my personal favourites is Erickson, who you meet in Far Harbour. He is the mutant that sells and trains dogs, wolves and mutant hounds, and he loves his dogs, and it's adorable. I think it's very sweet because I love dogs too. As you know, I was a vet for 15 years. There's some things about my career as a vet that I don't miss, but seeing dogs every day and puppies and things is something that I definitely do miss, because dogs are great, and I love Erickson because he loves dogs and he's a superstar. He's great. But we have more mutants being created for no real reason other than because science, or because I said so. They're just being created, dumped on the surface to terrorise the locals, and it just proves yet again that the Institute aren't the good guys of this story. They might say that they're the last best hope for humanity redefined, they're going to save the world. They don't care about the people that live on the surface, and this is just more evidence of that, really. The Institute and their kind of ethics and morality are going to be a subject of the video essays for August. So if you have any thoughts on that kind of thing, and some of the other things that the Institute's done that you think is reprehensible, or if you think that they have done anything that's beneficial, let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And I'll see you next week for more. Bye.